this leaked document and go to another part of the leak, because buried deep in a comment section about, of all things pet battling, the leaker casually revealed the future of the World Soul Saga. They claim that a setting-defining event will happen at the end of the Midnight expansion, something so big it'll change the course of Warcraft forever, and they reveal the real conflict of the Last Titan expansion, by which I mean who we'll be fighting and why having a particular character as the end boss of the World Soul Saga makes perfect sense. And after laying that out, they then claim that it's all set up for a WoW 2.0. A true lore reset. And if that all sounds mad, I'd totally agree with you. But is it real? Well, it is highly likely at least parts of this are real. We recently did a video deep diving the leak's veracity, and a lot of stuff does check out. But today, we're here to talk about the lore of the IP that so many of us love. So be warned, there are spoilers. Not granular details, not dialogue of specific characters, but absolutely we're talking about huge structural plot beats, from where we're at Midnight through to the end of the saga, and then far into the future. Here's the thing I've noticed, a lot of people who need a website don't have one, or they have one that doesn't look great. And it means .com/bellulargaming, and then when you're ready. Here's how our story begins. Last year, a Reddit user called Fifth Yacht leaked an internal development roadmap for the future of the Warcraft franchise. It's pretty spicy, there's many goodies in there, but when we sleuthed through their account, we found way more prescient information. In this post about pet battling in 11.2's Koresh, user Zelmac shared their theory that Koresh wasn't initially intended as a patch zone, and that originally the Rootlands was set to be in the War Within. But the Rootlands then became Harrendar, and Koresh was built from scratch under Chris Metzen's new World Soul Saga framing. Well, the user, the leaker, Fifth Yacht, actually says that theory is correct. And then they revealed what happens next. Here's what they wrote. Quote, "The next expansion will return to the Black Blood/World Soul, with Azeroth being the final titan and coming to life to cleanse the planet, including players. The last expansion will wrap up with us having to kill Azeroth to restore her. Then, off to WoW 2.0. Now that's a huge statement. I mean, what do we even make of any of that? Well, the good news is, quite a lot actually, so let's break it all down. Now, when this was posted, the next expansion in question was, of course, Midnight. And in Midnight, we can see that we have not strictly returned to the whole Black Blood story that was all through the War Within. But I believe the leaker was working with the context of the War Within's Black Blood storyline. We, of course, now know that that storyline has transformed into the Harrendar and World Soul story of Midnight. You know, all the stuff with Alanhara, the Rift of Aln, all that stuff. So it does basically check out. Next then, there's Azeroth. Azeroth as the final titan. Well, that's actually something that we've known the Titans themselves call her, and we know that since all the way back in Mists of Pandaria with the legendary Cloak quest. Basically what happens is, Rathian, being a bit of a mad bastard, consumes the heart of Lei Shen. Within the heart of Lei Shen was the essence of Aman'Thul. Aman'Thul, of course, being the big leader of the Titans. And upon consuming the heart, Rathian effectively was made a conduit for a message that was personally sent by Aman'Thul at the moment Sargeras defeated the Titan Pantheon. So, suffice it to say, that checks out. Now, the next thing is Azeroth coming to life to cleanse the world, and that including us. Of course, the idea of a Titan cleansing a planet is not really a surprising thing. Remember, of course, Algalon, the final boss of Ulduar. But in all of the leaks, this really was the big one, the idea that Azeroth would actually wake up. Now, we've been told since the end of the Legion expansion that Azeroth was waking up, but it always felt like something in the far future. Well, the future is almost here, and the leak claims that this happens in the expansion we are playing right now, and that it is actually the final big epic moment of the Midnight expansion. But that's when it does get a bit tough, because apparently she's going to cleanse us, and I don't think that means unclogging our pores. I think it probably means burning us in some sort of grand fire. Maybe, maybe not. There's a few options here, actually. Of course, Xal'atath is on her way to the World Core literally as we speak. That's where Azeroth basically is imprisoned. So Xal'atath could corrupt Azeroth. Maybe then Sargeras' sword will have done something, maybe shot some of that fell juice into the world and made Azeroth go loopy. But looking at the story as it's developing right now, I think the most realistic outcome is this. The Titans' mission to transform Azeroth into one of their own is going to succeed, and in the end, we just won't fit into the Titans' plans for Azeroth. Though if I was a Titan, I wouldn't be so sure, because we don't even know if the Titans will fit into the vision of a titanic risen Azeroth. What if she wakes up and decides that the Titans are also a big old mess? That could absolutely happen. But based on what we can read in the leak and the surrounding lore context, it maybe seems like the last Titan is a war against Azeroth herself. Maybe a corrupted Azeroth, who exactly knows, but perhaps more against her than it would be against, say, Xal'atath or the Titan Pantheon. And that would mean that the true meaning of the World Soul Saga is ultimately its end boss, the last Titan. So let's see what that looks like, and why there are no other good options. Okay, let's assume all this stuff is real and that it is still Blizzard's plan. Do remember, of course, plans can change. But let's assume then that Azeroth is going to wake up and then try to cleanse the planet, including us, the players. Now, there are realistically 3 reasons why that would happen. The first is Xal'atath. As the story currently stands, she has the best chance of corrupting Azeroth and, yes, sending her on some kind of world-cleansing mission. Xal'atath has long claimed to want our World Soul, but we've never been 100% sure why. And within that why could be a full explanation of what's contained within the leak. Though what we do know currently is the background Void lore effectively tells us that Xal'atath wants to use Azeroth's power to become the ultimate devourer, the thing that will consume all of creation until, as the prophet Velen saw in his early visions of the Void, she just becomes an endless nothing, eternally gnawing on itself, which would be bad news for us. Now, the next option is the Titans, and that's honestly not much better for the denizens of Azeroth. Yes, we don't trust them as much as we used to, but they were very recently working with us. And even if we're drawn into conflict, I think it is the case that the Titans aren't simply evil. To say that would be a reductive view of how they've been characterized so far. Think about it this way. Azeroth is called the final Titan in the lore, but the end of the World Soul Saga is called the Last Titan. Let's think about those names. If the Titans turn Azeroth into one of them, then, just like in the Void scenario, she would become the ultimate being of order. Nothing will be good enough in her eyes based on how beings of order tend to work in this verse. And that would mean that everything would have to be unmade and then remade into some perfect balanced system. That probably includes the Titans themselves, leading to a cosmos of perfect static order. Again, that's bad news for us, and in that case, the final Titan may ensure that she is the last Titan. Then there's the third option, and this is the darkest of them. It's that Azeroth emerges from the world as a traumatized monstrosity. Beings like Chimeras, the undreamt god, or, say, the uncontrollable superweapon Ulatek, who we're going to be dealing with in patch 12.1. Effectively, in this reading of the lore, Azeroth would be a nightmare-fueled, half-void-infected, half-order-infected world soul, so sick of bullshit and chaos that she just decides to cleanse everything with fire. Now, no matter what happens, you can see that any 3 of those are pretty rumbly, but with any of them, there is a way that we can save our world, save its soul, and bring Warcraft into its next era. And now that you've heard it all, I bet you've got an uncanny sense that you felt this coming, that one way or another, we were always going to meet Azeroth. People have been talking about Azeroth waking up for nearly as long as we've known that she was in fact a sleeping world soul. Here's the community working out what she could look like 9 years ago. It's some pretty sick art. Here's another post worrying that whenever it happens, the planet will basically pop open like an egg and that all our characters will be deleted. Certainly a valid fear. And even if this early lore exploration doesn't get the details right, it's clear that all these people knew this was coming. And not because they could magically tell the future, but because this story has been building since World of Warcraft launched. Let's go back to Chronicle. Chronicle told us in no uncertain terms that Azeroth was a world soul and would one day emerge as a fully grown titan. But that was just a confirmation of something that we'd actually already known. If you ask a Wrath of the Lich King veteran what they thought Azeroth was, they would give you something pretty close to the modern truth when you actually think about the lore. As an example, take a read of the Discs of Norgannon in Vanilla's Uldaman dungeon. You see, we discovered that earthen transformed into dwarves, but we didn't really know why they did that. Now, this is a mystery that was first resolved with the Old Gods and the Curse of Flesh, and then of course later with the Earthen of Khazalgar gaining free will under the influence of the World Soul. Now, in the Storm Peaks, we experienced an immense 3-part revelation about the Titans. In the Tribunal of Ages, we discovered that Azeroth, the planet, was a host. But a host to what? We just didn't know back then. But even Yogg-Saron backed that up whenever we killed him, because when we did, he told us that the end of days was upon our miserable seedling. He called Azeroth a seedling. What was she going to grow up into then? What did he know? Of course, almost immediately after that in Ulduar, we face off against Algalon. We defeat him, and when we defeated him, we basically convinced him that being a native of Azeroth gave us some sort of special free will sauce, and then maybe we could take on the old god corruption ourselves. And if that all seems a bit rumbly to you, basically Algalon is a type of being that we call a Constellar. They're deeply entwined with the Titans in ways we probably don't fully understand yet, but his job was to watch over things, and if stuff completely went foobar, if Azeroth got just totally corrupted, he basically could hit the big button that would re-originate the world, effectively fire off all the Titan machinery that we had discovered, and cleanse the whole thing, with everyone on it. Now, he wouldn't just do that willy-nilly, he would make a determination, he would make a calculation. And when he calculated that he would defeat us, but in fact we defeated him, he then realized, oh dear, what if my calculations aren't all correct? And that's why the world didn't end in the middle of Wrath of the Lich King. And that's a moment in a lore exploration that I think you really have to feel to get how Blizzard have been developing this lore for, I don't know, like 20 years. Now you may then be thinking, why were we so special? Well, the good news is that over the years, the lore has circled ever closer to giving us a definitive answer to that question. Here's an example. In the Cataclysm expansion, Malfurion was on a bit of a side quest to save the world from a nightmare-spawned sleeping sickness whenever he discovered the Rift of Oln, this bizarre, half-dreamed place deep within the Emerald Drain. Now, when Malfurion was there, he sensed N'Zoth, but he also sensed something older, something primeval, and we now know what he felt was the remnant of Azeroth's true cradle within Harrendar. Cradle basically being where she just kind of bedded up and chilled out, let's just say. Canonically, that story happens during Cataclysm, though the next bit is something that we actually saw when we played Cataclysm, and that is Magni transforming into a diamond. He basically tried to commune with the world, turned into a diamond, everyone thought he was basically dead, but that was only until Thrall found his spirit, traveling in the deep places, talking with something. A bit weird. Now, by the time of the Legion expansion, Magni is back in his feet, and he tells us what the recently released Warcraft Chronicle had made canon, and that was that Azeroth herself was a world soul. Then we were told repeatedly through Battle of Azeroth that the planet had a personality, that the planet was an entity, not just some artificial dead thing or a source of power. No, she was an actual being of some sort. And the Judas Sargeras' actions at the end of Legion, she was in great peril. You may remember the famous voice lines about "Champion! The wounds!" All that stuff. Of course, in BFA, we patched her up, we thwarted a plan from N'Zoth, and then the next two expansions went back and forth on what Azeroth actually was. But then, the World Soul Saga revealed the all-time maximum canon authentic lore for what Azeroth is, and that is some form of being at the center of creation. And we learn that if any one of the unbalanced forces of the cosmos was to control her, that it would basically be the end of everything. But throughout all that lore development, no matter what iteration of the World Soul we were on, Azeroth was always one thing: sleeping. Now we know that she's going to wake up, and that when she does, she'll be controlled by, likely, one of those unbalanced powers, be it Xal'atath, be it the Titans. And that will be when this long built-up threat and storyline actually becomes real. But through all those vast quantities of lore, there is actually a facet of Azeroth that had not been covered until recently, and that is her true name. Her true name is Alanhara. So whenever we fight Azeroth, if the leak's to be believed, the thing we're actually going to try and save is Alanhara, because Alanhara is our world's true nature. And it's in saving Alanhara that we will see the seeds of a lore reset that will truly bring us into something that you could call WoW 2.0. It's been a crazy ride to get here. We've got the early days of, say, the Tauren mythos and the Earth Mother, and how the Earth Mother could cause earthquakes, to now where we have a world soul on the verge of waking up. This truly is Warcraft's central story, or at least one of the central pillars of the lore, finally getting to its natural conclusion. And that's why the World Soul Saga is as much closing WoW 1.0 as it is setting up WoW 2.0. So let's talk about what happens next. Because we've known since Metzen announced the saga that they're thinking about the future. And by the future, I mean WoW version 14 and onward. First, to do this, they need to reset the stakes. Each expansion tends to deliver a new layer of power, they keep on stacking, and eventually, by the end of it, we'll be fighting the planet itself. That's getting a bit out of hand, but equally, it is something we do actually need to deal with. So it seems Blizzard is going to nuke all of it. How would they do that? Well, they would do it with Azeroth. Or, like I said, Alanhara, her real name. Now, behind every top-level villain's motivations was Azeroth. Sargeras wanted to destroy her. The old gods wanted to create a dark titan out of her. The titans, of course, wanted her to wake up as a new Pantheon member who'd be able to help them in their grand old plan to order the cosmos just as they see fit. And for the longest time, we only understood Azeroth through the motivations of those villainous characters. And now they're all on a collision course for the World Soul. Xal'atath is almost there. The Titans are likely on their way back, and Sargeras may even be with them. In our war to cleanse Azeroth, there will be casualties. And if you want to reset the power scaling in your universe, well, killing off all your gods is a good way to do that. And now we can actually see a power that could credibly kill off the gods. That power would be an Ascendant World Soul. At first corrupted, ordered, or insane. But perhaps then we cleanse her because we have to cleanse her. There's no other choice. What Alanhara offers, then, is the truth that no one was really able to see. That she was more powerful, perhaps, than any force that could have controlled her. And in that moment, she may indeed wipe the board. It at least seems to me that is the lore implication of all the leaks that have came out. And it's when a credible picture of what comes next actually snaps into focus for me, at least personally. Right? A setting cleared of massive powers. No more Titans or Void Lords vying for domination. No more, oh, this is the purple expansion, this is the green expansion, oh, it's the Void, it's the Fel, where it all just starts to feel really pedestrian and disconnected from the experience of our characters in the world that we love. And to step outside of the lore side, what I'm really talking about here is finally an opportunity to tell entirely new stories in Azeroth that are rooted in the lore of Azeroth. And if you ask me, that sounds exactly like a spiritual WoW 2.0. Not putting it into Unreal Engine or some gimmick like that, but an actual change to the status quo that signals a fresh beginning. And after all of the crud that I think we've accumulated over the years within the lore, that may indeed be a healthy thing. Provided, of course, Blizzard is able to remember the essential intrinsic properties of the Warcraft IP that drew people towards it all those years ago and for so many years since. Because if WoW 2.0 looks like generic, easy-to-consume fantasy slop, I think it will die on the vine. If, however, it can reestablish itself as a true secondary world that actually is treated seriously, then we could be off in a good direction, especially if that's backed up by the likes of, say, the other things that are there in those leaks, like another RTS, a Arthas game, maybe stuff established in Netflix series. Now, earlier on in the video, I mentioned one of the horrors that came out of the Rift of Olm, this Ulatek. Well, Ulatek is a core part of WoW's next patch. Ulatek seems really, really cool, and if you want to get all of the lore you need for that, simply watch this video next.
I'm about to go to court, and I don't even know what I did wrong. Yeah, Bricks and Minifigs is making up tons of lies about me to the police to try to get me thrown in jail so I can't release my documentary about them. But the crazy part is I'm not even allowed to know what they're saying I did. Legally, I'm not allowed to film inside court, so I formally requested the audio, but since there was no visual, I hired an animator to animate over it.
Right now, I kind of don't even know what I'm being charged for because all of the body cam footage has been redacted, and they say it's to protect the victims. However, I think there are some redactions that maybe don't make sense and that weren't to protect the victims, and there's some things being said about me that are redacted I don't know about.
I do have some concern in this case with the defendant representing himself. The allegations here relate to the fact that the defendant, he's a person he's a YouTuber, who creates videos, publishes them online, and has been, if this defendant were to represent himself,
from a company called Bricks and Minifigs.
Oh.
And for the last couple months, this company's been doing whatever they can to get me arrested.
Yep.
So they can keep all the Legos for themselves.
Naturally.
And this isn't even just me speculating. One of their own employees literally told us what their plan was.
I got a call from my boss, and it was like, how do we get them arrested?
How do we get them arrested?
But
That's
eventually, Bricks and
crazy.
Minifigs found out that I'm not just some random kid. I'm actually a YouTuber making a documentary on the entire scandal.
So the YouTube guy is named Reckless Ben. I don't want to be on YouTube.
Yeah, this is when things really started getting crazy. Bricks and Minifigs went into
I don't wanna
ultimate
be on
defense
YouTube.
mode and was going to do whatever it takes to prevent this documentary from coming out. First, the police got a call saying I had heroin on me.
This officer is going to conduct a search of your person because
This was so stupid. Oh
And
my
obviously,
god.
they found nothing. But then they got a call saying that I was the one that stole the Legos. And I got swatted by the entire police department.
Included in the warrant are Legos.
And we all got arrested. But right when I got out of jail, I got a warrant for my arrest for some mystery crime that I committed.
A warrant for what?
Live in LA, or his last known address is in LA.
Yeah, the police showed up to my house all the way in Los Angeles to arrest
This is all for Legos.
me without bail.
He was like, just tell him he has a warrant for his arrest.
But
Yeah.
the police couldn't arrest me.
And you're where he actually is?
no idea.
They don't even know.
I was somewhere very far away. But anyways, back to court. The judge is looking at signing a protective order to protect Josh and all of his statements about me. If this protective order gets
protective
signed,
order.
then I'll never be able to find out what he's claiming I did.
Yeah.
I got bad news. I don't think we have any more budget for animation, dude.
Oh shoot. Oh, so how do we animate this next court scene? I guess if we have to not pay the lawyers, then I guess the animation's more important, right?
Yeah, we decided maybe the lawyers are actually more important. So, yeah, we ran.
Oh, so how do we animate this next court scene? I guess if we have to not pay the lawyers, then I guess the animation's more important, right?
Yeah, we decided maybe the lawyers are actually more important. So, yeah, we ran out of animation budget. Sorry, guys.
The court's inclined to sign this pretrial protective order unless you have an objection to it, Mr. Schneider, and the objection to such an order.
Yes, I think there's a bunch of misunderstandings in this case, and so this person doesn't want to get exposed, so he's making up a lot of lies about me to order to like get me arrested before he gets exposed. So that's what this whole thing's about.
However, before I was allowed to show any of the overwhelming evidence I have to support my claims, the judge didn't care about the evidence and signed the protective order anyways.
Mr. Schneider, the court's going to sign this order.
I got bad news.
Away.
Warrant for his arrest. Just tell him.
Address is in LA.
Arrested. But right when I got out of jail, I got a warrant for my arrest for.
Oh
and
my
obviously,
god.
they documentary on the entire scandal.
So the YouTube guy is named.
Family who got their Lego collection stolen from a company called Bricks and Minifigs.
Oh. Yep.
So they can keep all the Legos for themselves.
Naturally.
And this isn't even just me speculating. One of their own employees literally told us what their plan was.
I got a call from my boss, and it was like, how do we get them arrested?
How do we get them arrested?
But
That's
eventually, Bricks and
crazy.
Minifigs found out that I'm not just some random kid. I'm actually a YouTuber making a documentary on the entire scandal.
So the YouTube guy is named Reckless Ben. I don't want to be on YouTube.
Yeah, this is when things really started getting crazy. Bricks and Minifigs went into
I don't wanna
ultimate
be on
defense
YouTube.
mode and was going to do whatever it takes to prevent this documentary from coming out. First, the police got a call saying I had heroin on me.
This officer is going to conduct a search of your person because
This was so stupid. Oh
And
my
obviously,
god.
they found nothing. But then they got a call saying that I was the one that stole the Legos. And I got swatted by the entire police department.
Included in the warrant are Legos.
And we all got arrested. But right when I got out of jail, I got a warrant for my arrest for some mystery crime that I committed.
A warrant
Seems like
for
this guy
what?
might live in LA, or his last known address is in LA.
Yeah, the police showed up to my house all the way in Los Angeles to arrest
This is all for Legos.
me without bail.
He was like, just tell him he has a warrant for his arrest.
But
Yeah.
the police couldn't arrest me.
And you're where he actually is?
no idea.
They don't even know.
I was somewhere very far away. But anyways, back to court. The judge is looking at signing a protective order to protect Josh and all of his statements about me. If this protective order gets
protective
signed,
order.
then I'll never be able to find out what he's claiming I did.
Yeah.
I got bad news. I don't think we have any more budget for animation, dude.
Oh shoot. Oh, so how do we animate this next court scene?
Animation, dude.
Oh.
I don't think we have any more budget for animation, dude.
Oh shoot. Oh, so how do we animate this next court scene? I guess if we have to not pay the lawyers, then I guess the animation's more important, right?
Yeah, we decided maybe the lawyers are actually more important, so